Well, I'm so glad you are here today on this Easter Sunday, 2024. My name's Aaron Horton. I'm the lead pastor here, and we welcome you. If you're a guest with us, there is a Connect card on your chair. There's also a piece of paper, but if you don't mind, fill out that Connect card, and after the service, please stop by the connection table. We'd love the chance to get to know you a little bit more and just find out what's going on in your life. That's also a great way, if you have a prayer request, you can let us know about that. But on that piece of paper, there's a QR code, and you can get that, and it'll take you to the Church Center app. Look for Pineville Church, and you will be able to see everything that's going on in the life of the church, all the different groups, all the different events. But particularly, there's a place there for what's called notes and quotes. If you want to follow along with some of the stuff that I'll be talking about this morning, the scriptures and some of the points that you might want to come back to, but that's there for you. So I was thinking this week about some times, especially when I was a kid, things that I was afraid of. Things that pretty much fed my fear. I was very much afraid of the dark. Anybody else when they were a kid afraid of the dark? Yeah, okay, this is a good confession time. I was afraid of the dark. I was afraid sometimes, well, all the time, to go to bed, and I was afraid to go to sleep in the dark. I was insistent that someone needed to be. I really liked it when someone could be in the room with me, like mom or dad or one of my brothers, and I was extra happy if we would leave the light on, even when they were in the room, just help things there. Even if they would stand at the door, right? Like, I know I'm not alone in this, y'all. But I was just gripped by these fears. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten less afraid of that kind of stuff, and my fears have changed. I have different kinds of fears now. Fears of as I've gotten older, as I look back on just the different stages of my life, different times and different types of fears. Fears of fears of having a job, fears of needing to get a job, fears of being by myself, fears of stability, right? Fears about the future. Even fears about death. Like at some point we die. My son and I, we've been watching recently History's Mysteries. If you really want to get yourself messed up, right? There's a lot of things to be afraid of. Whew. Fears. Over these next few weeks, this new series we're starting today is called Don't Be Afraid. We're going to be looking at the different times when Jesus spoke into the fears that we face, particularly fears that his disciples were facing, and all the different times that Jesus would say to them, don't be afraid. And today we're going to be looking at the Easter story through the eyes of Matthew, one of Jesus' disciples in the New Testament, the very first book in the New Testament, the book of Matthew. Actually, Matthew, his first recorded words that he has that Jesus saying, his words, the very first recorded words that Matthew has is that Jesus says is, don't be afraid. So let's take a look at Matthew's version of that resurrection morning, all right? Matthew chapter 28, if you have your Bibles, or you can follow along on the screen or in the notes and quotes, says, early on Sunday morning, as the new day was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went out to visit the tomb. Suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, rolled aside the stone, and sat on it. His face shone like lightning, and his clothing was as white as snow. The guards shook with fear when they saw him, and they fell into a dead faint. Then the angel spoke to the women. You want to say this with me? What does the angel say? Ready? Don't be afraid, he said. I know you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He isn't here. He is risen from the dead, just as Jesus said would happen. Come, see where his body was lying. And now, go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead, and he is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there. Remember, what I have told you." The women ran quickly from the tomb. They were very frightened, but also filled with great joy. Say frightened, but filled with great joy. Ready? Frightened, but filled with great joy. And they rushed to give the disciples the angel's message. As they went, Jesus met them and greeted them. And they ran to him, grasped his feet, and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, what did Jesus say? First three words. Ready? Don't be afraid. Go tell my brothers to leave for Galilee, and they will see me there. I love the first part of this version that Matthew tells us, right? As the new day was dawning. Right? The women, they were going there to see and take care of the body of Jesus. These disciples, all the disciples, with Jesus' death, they just figured, this is the way it's happening. And now they wanted to give him some dignity in his death, dignity in his burial, take care of the body. He had an undignified death on the cross. They wanted to show him some dignity in his death. Their hearts were broken, but they had a job to do. And Jesus being alive, or there not being a body in that tomb, that's the furthest thing from their minds, right? And the first thing they hear as they arrive on the scene, first of all, they probably notice that the stone's not in front of the tomb, and they're already thinking something is not right. And then there's this guy there, this angel, this guy who's supposedly glowing white. And he's actually the first one they hear the words, "Don't be afraid." Don't be afraid. Now, I don't know about you, but I was trying to think how it would be like to be in their shoes walking up to that moment. And if someone told me not to be afraid, I would probably think, maybe I should be afraid. I wonder if they could even hear the words that the angel said in the midst of all of that happening. You see, this whole phrase, "don't be afraid," this is not the first time that this would have been heard in relationship to Jesus. In fact, that phrase, "don't be afraid," usually means that something is about to happen, or something has happened, or even that something is happening in that moment. We think of that word, "don't be afraid," and we think of when Jesus' mother, Mary, right? When she finds out that she is pregnant, that she is going to have a baby, and it's going to be a baby that will save the world. And the angel that shows up to Mary, what does he say to her? He says, "Don't be afraid." Or we think of Joseph, the father of Jesus, the adoptive father of Jesus, right? Who's found out that Mary is pregnant, and it's not going to be his. And he's like, I don't know about this, and maybe he's going to, he says, divorce her quietly. So he has a dream, and the angel shows up in this dream. What does the angel say? "Don't be afraid." Or the shepherds out on the hillside, right? Jesus is born, and the angels show up. "Fear not, don't be afraid." This is the announcement that something is about to happen. And I don't know, I can't imagine if they would really be processing exactly what this angel is saying, but they know that the angel is telling them that they're supposed to go back and tell the other guys, and so they take off running, right? And as they're running, it says, and really interesting, this tells us a lot about the emotions that they're experiencing, that they were filled with fear and great joy. Fear and great joy. And then it says this in verses 9 and 10. And as they went, Jesus met them and greeted them. And they ran to him, grasped his feet, and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Don't be afraid. Go tell my brothers to leave for Galilee, and they will see me there." It's as if the fears that they are carrying with them, right? They are filled with fear and they're filled with great joy. I have a feeling that there's probably a little bit more fear than there is joy in this moment. And it's as if their fear runs right into Jesus. Right into Jesus. Now Jesus shows them that he is alive. They have seen him. And here's why this matters, that they have seen the living Jesus. Because if Jesus is alive, then everything he taught them, everything he said he would do, he can do it. And now, right before their eyes, right in the middle of their fears, at the moment when they thought nothing was going to change, right? Nothing was going to change. This ending was the way it was. Jesus shows up and changes everything. And he speaks the words. He speaks these words to give them courage. To give them courage. Here's my first point. Don't be afraid to believe. Don't be afraid to believe. I know that we live in a world that there is so much discouragement. I know we live in a world that many of us are carrying around so much loneliness and brokenness. There are people and institutions who have let us down. Many of us are searching for something to bring fulfillment to our lives. Some of us are wondering, what difference does all of this make? All of us wonder this at some point. I tend to believe that what Jesus wants to do, what he wants to do is to come to life in us, to bring his life to life in us. That's who he is. That's what he does. This is how God reveals his love for people and creation. It is through his created ones. But he doesn't force himself on us. He invites us to not be afraid, but to trust him. And listen, if we will respond like those women did, if we will seek him and worship him and open our hearts to him, I promise you, if we really do approach Jesus like that, we will hear him say, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. But then notice what he says to them, what he tells them to do, right? He tells them to go and tell his brothers, go and tell the other disciples what they have seen, what they have heard, to go and tell them about the resurrected Jesus, to go and tell them about their experience with him, right? This is what he's telling them to go and do. So here's my second point for us today. Don't be afraid to tell others. Now, I'm not talking about being obnoxious, all right? My goodness, the world has had enough obnoxious Christians who have no self-awareness. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about don't be afraid to tell friends and family about the Jesus you have encountered. The Jesus in the Bible who stands up for the marginalized and for the forgotten. The Jesus, we talked about this last week if you were here, we talked about how Jesus hangs out and has dinner with notorious sinners. That's the Jesus we know. That should be a big amen from people, all right? And yeah, there might be moments that people won't want to hear what you have to say. And yes, it is incredibly important for us to be respectful and to love people who can't seem to understand what we're talking about. But listen, you never know. It may be through your attitude of kindness and love that finally they do see the living Jesus. It might be through your life that they hear the words of Jesus that says, don't be afraid. Now, the next section there, if you're following along in the Bible, in the book of Matthew, chapter 28, the next section talks about how the guards who were there got together with some of these religious leaders who were trying to put this whole Jesus thing to, put it to bed and put it out. And so they come up with this idea to counter whatever they think that the disciples might say, right? So I imagined what that day might have been like if it was unfolding. If it was unfolding today, can you imagine what social media would have said? Right? Don't believe fake news that Jesus is alive. Or the conspiracy theories. I don't even want to go there, all right? And so all this confusion, all of this hostility that these disciples would have to face, I mean, it's real. Chaos. But what I love about this is that these disciples, instead of getting lost in the chaos, they listen to the words of Jesus. And at the very end of Matthew 28, listen to what it says, verse 16, it says, "Then the 11 disciples left for Galilee, going to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshiped him, but some of them doubted. Jesus came and told his disciples, 'I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And be sure of this.'" I want all of us to read this last line together because this is important for it right here. Ready? "I am with you always, even to the end of the age." Here's my last point for us today. Don't be afraid to live in the resurrection. Jesus coming back to life means that now we can have the power within us to live this life that Jesus has for us. It means that the future we have will not be stopped even by death. So we don't have to be afraid because our future is in Jesus. That means we don't have to be afraid to love people unconditionally because we recognize God has loved us so unconditionally that death can't even stop us. It means we can be free from our fear that our lives don't have any purpose. It means we can be free from our fear of not being enough. It means we can be free from our fear of rejection. It means we can be free from our fear of our past. It means we can be free from thinking we can't change because of Jesus. We can change. This is what Jesus has done. Because of Jesus, fear is not our future. Don't be afraid to live in the resurrection. Would you stand? I want us to move into a time of reflection. If you'd bow your heads and close your eyes just for a moment. This is what we do every week at the end of my message. I have us move into a time of prayer and just reflecting on what we've heard. And I believe God is speaking. I don't believe that a single person in this room is here on accident. That you are here on this Easter Sunday to be reminded of something. And maybe you need to hear the words, "Don't be afraid to believe." Don't be afraid to give Jesus your life. To explore what that even means. Don't be afraid. So we have a prayer that we do every week, and maybe this is a prayer that you could say for the first time or recommit your life to Jesus with it. But this is what the prayer goes like, and I invite you to pray it as I say it over us today. It goes like this: Jesus, I give you my life. Jesus, I confess my sins, and I ask for your forgiveness. And this last line in this prayer is really important. I believe this is so important because it goes like this: Jesus, I trust that you do forgive me, and I receive your love. Today, lay it down. Don't keep holding on to it. Lay it down. Receive his love. Receive his forgiveness. Believe and trust that he really does forgive you today. I believe if you have prayed this prayer from your heart, it will mean the world of difference for you. And I want to encourage you today that if you have prayed this prayer, you've made this a declaration of your life, I want to encourage you to be baptized. And a little bit later, you can take that blue card and mark on there that you've decided to follow Jesus. You can mark on there that you want to be baptized and then bring it to the connection table. We want to walk with you. But I encourage you today, follow Jesus. Don't be afraid to believe. God, thank you for the sense of your presence in this room, for the way you are speaking to us. In your name I pray. Amen.